So, hello, and welcome to the Dharma Gates podcast. So, here I'll be interviewing folks with deep expertise on topics relevant to the future of Buddhism, young people in the Dharma, and opportunities for residential and monastic practice in the Buddhist tradition. So, I've been recording a series of interviews with abbots, directors, teachers from residential practice communities in the US. So, these are places of strong practice where you can go and sit retreats, live or pursue monastic life. And one of our missions with Dharma Gates is to help young practitioners or anybody really connect to communities where there's real deep training for goes as deep as you want to go. And a lot of these places they don't really have much publicity. They're not out there as big names, and so I think it's an important thing that we can do to find them and talk to them, talk to the teachers and learn what they're offering and how people can get involved. So in this interview, I'm delighted to be joined by Lama Dragpa, a Lama and teacher at Padmasambhava Buddhist Center, which is a Buddhist study and meditation center in the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, located in Sydney Center, New York. So that's upstate in the kind of Western Catskills. And I'll just say a little bit more about Lama Dragpa's practice background, and then we'll move into some questions about their community. So Lama Dragpa has been a resident Dharma teacher at Padmasambhava Ling, the main monastery and retreat center of Padmasambhava Buddhist Center, since 2004. That's about 20 years. And the institute was founded and directed by Nyingma Dzogchen masters Venerable Kenshin Palden Sherab Rinpoche and Venerable Khenpo Sewang Dongyal Rinpoche, who both trained and mastered the ancient traditions of the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. Lama Dragpa lives and teaches at Padmasambhava Ling and was ordained as a Lama by the Venerable Khenpo Rinpoches. He's a senior editor of over 20 books on philosophy, meditation, and Buddhist tenets. Lama Dragpa graduated with honors in philosophy and religious studies from NYU in 2002. He's a hospice volunteer, taught at Colgate University, Scranton University, Binghamton Community College, and regularly travels to lead PBC events on traditional and contemporary Buddhist philosophy and meditation. That's a little bit of the professional side, but we'll get into practice a little bit more. So thank you for taking the time to join me and to share a little bit.
Thanks, friend. It's a pleasure. Really delighted to be here and share some time. Thank you.
Great. Well, we have a few questions, and we'll see how much we get through. But first one is a pretty big one, which I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on, which is, so I've had a little bit of exposure to the Vajrayana now through the Vajrayana Foundation in California, and just starting to read about it more and try to understand what's going on. And for those that don't know, there seem to be these three main schools of the Vajrayana tradition, possibly four, but generally three. And the Nyingma is one of these, is the oldest school in my understanding. And maybe you could share a little bit about what does that word mean to you, and what is the kind of defining feature of that version, that instantiation of the kind of Tibetan Buddhist
Great, thanks again.
tradition.
It's an honor to be here and to speak a little bit about Buddha Dharma in general, Nyingma school in particular. And Nyingma. The Nyingma school is often translated as the ancient ones. So back around 650 or so BCE, when Buddha Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, first taught the entire Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the nature of Buddhism, he did that in India. And then many, many centuries later, around the 8th century or so, there was a wave of Buddhism that went into Tibet. And that wave, this first wave of Buddhism into Tibet, where it was first being established by Guru Padmasambhava and Dharma King Tritsen Detsen and the great Shantrakshita, Lopan Shantrakshita, then these three were establishing this full, complete package of Buddha's teachings, his study, practice, and service, all in Tibet for the first time to establish it in the new land of Tibet. And so that first wave is the Nyingma school. And then at a certain point later, a couple 200 to 300 years or so afterwards, Buddhism was almost entirely eradicated from the country of Tibet by kind of a very ill-intended king at that time. But it wasn't. It was successfully maintained in Tibet and also in India. And so at that point, there was a second wave of Buddhism going into Tibet from India. And that's, in retrospect, that second wave called the first wave, the Nyingma, the ancient ones, the ones that first brought the Buddha Dharma into Tibet and established it in its entirely in Tibet. And this second wave was then called the new school, the Sarma, the new school. So this new wave or additional wave of Buddha's complete teachings into Tibet again. And so the Nyingma school, like I said, the way I've been taught by Venerable Khenchen Palden Sherab Rinpoche and Venerable Khenpo Seon Donyo Rinpoche many times, and they're following in the footsteps of the Buddha and Guru Padmasambhava and the great His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche and the great Jamgang Mipam Rinpoche and the great Longchenpa and all these lineage masters. They've kind of presented the Nyingma school as being this entirety of the Buddha Dharma, of the Buddha's teachings that were fully kind of presented by the Buddha in various times, in various ways. But when the Buddha presented those later, when that full package, complete set of teachings of study, practice, and service, or kind of like these outreaching, compassionate activities, when all of these went to Tibet, that's the Nyingma school. So it has an entire series of internested approaches or vehicles of how to like refine your intellectual awareness so that it becomes more attuned to and aligned with accurately with the nature of reality of the Dharma. That's called study. In addition, not just to consider the teachings, try to contemplate the teachings, but to fully absorb those so they're like utterly, like naturally, seamlessly integrated with your heart mind. That's called meditation or practice. All the transformative techniques to actually become the Dharma, not just to like understand it, but to like fully integrate it. And then service is the natural outreaching capacity that if the nature is wisdom and compassion, if our heart is naturally joyful and outreaching, buoyant, powerful, and connected, compassionate, if it is that way, when it's open and flexible, this empty kind of like really inclusive kind of spacious availability, this emptiness, if it's really compassion and wisdom, the nature of each mind, then this wisdom and compassion would naturally extend its outreaching kind of inclusive support of all beings and actually all experience. So that's this whole skillful means or this service component. So the Nyingma school includes these three parts: always, study, practice, and service. Study, meditation, and service. Sometimes these are referred to actually as in Tibetan Buddhism, the three lords of Chenrezig, Manjushri, and Vajrapani. The wisdom, compassion, and power are powerful, skillful means. And then within Nyingma school, there's so many different lineages of different masters who, when Guru Rinpoche or Guru Padmasambhava, when he brought these teachings in the 8th century or so into Tibet and established them completely with the help of King Tritsa Detsen and Shantarakshita, then these different methods were then practiced and accomplished by a variety of people. These beings became enlightened themselves, and then they had their own respective students, and thus like these different lineages of study, practice, and communicative like service happened. And so we get these different lineage streams within the Nyingma school itself, of which there's so many of them. So that's a general, kind of very general ways to locate what the Nyingma school is and what it includes. But do you want to zoom in particular on any of the textures of that?
Well, yeah, so there's this character who's very integral to this whole story, which is Padmasambhava. And maybe you could share a little bit more about, I think both there's kind of a historical perspective, and there's also this kind of almost mythic or this deity perspective of Padmasambhava or Guru Rinpoche. And maybe you could speak to, who was this guy? and And what's the significance of Guru Rinpoche? Because it seems a lot of the practices, actually, in my experience or study, also he's invoked frequently as a kind of almost deity
Yeah,
figure.
so it's a just exceptionally profound question to even consider for a moment the fathomless depths and pervasive qualities of Guru Padmasambhava, or of any enlightened being, a fully awakened being, is just very humbling. And it's really for like myself as a totally deluded sentient being to try to like understand how an enlightened being is and what they are is like literally with very bad vision and something in my eye peeking through a keyhole and trying to figure out what's happening like 5 miles away. Like, it's just so, just kind of like embarrassingly bound to be inaccurate and very distorted. But there are also a lot of lineage teachings that Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava taught, and that the Buddha taught, and all these lineage masters have taught about Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche. Pema Junye has so many names. He has so many different emanations. He has so many different ways that he's helped beings in the past, present, and in the future. So they say Guru Rinpoche is the embodiment of all the Buddhas of all 3 times, past, present, and future, in all directions. Throughout any place there's a space where there's sentient beings in this universe, Guru Rinpoche embodies the enlightened wisdom capacity and like the intelligence, the wisdom mind of all of the beings that have fully awakened, all coming together seamlessly, elegantly into a single manifestation, which is Guru Padmasambhava. And so Guru Rinpoche, we can look at Guru Rinpoche in different ways. Like in the Nyingma school, it always begins with the view, or tawa, the worldview. What way am I engaging reality now? How am I understanding what's going on? And so we have that same kind of question in terms of how we would answer, like, who is Guru Rinpoche? It really depends on my view. How am I looking at Guru Rinpoche? Am I looking in a more literal way that sees an actual person with flesh and blood that's doing very specific factual activities in a very literal landscape? That's one way to view things. There's much more subtle ways to also view things. And there's a lot of different ways to understand and unpack Guru Rinpoche, let alone like any aspect of reality. There's many, many different views, many different approaches and methods we can take. So Guru Rinpoche embodies all the enlightened ones, of the noble ones, the ones who fully awakened. It's really, it's so humbling to try to begin as Guru Rinpoche. So this place is called the Padmasambhava Buddhist Center. And Guru Rinpoche is like the heart teacher of all the Buddhas. Even Buddha Shakyamuni in Mahaparinirvana Sutra said that, about four kind of Gregorian years after he passed away, entered Mahaparinirvana, he would come back even more enlightened. And his name would be Pema Junye, born of the lotus. So he was saying that, and he said his activities would be like even better than before. Like there's no higher enlightenment than Buddha Shakyamuni. But in these very specific ways that Guru Rinpoche taught, which are magnificent and magical, they're miraculous, they're like unfathomable to like small-mindedness, to like my narrow duality fixation. They said he was born as an 8-year-old boy, as an emanation, on a lotus, surrounded by all these beings, these wisdom dakinis and dakas, spontaneously singing the 7-line prayer, Vajra song, the resonant sound of the nature unfiltered through dualistic tension and grasping. Its resurging resonance as a natural enlightened energy. It was just spontaneously around him. And he showed all the ways to study, to practice, and to like do outreaching abilities, the full range of how enlightened activities can happen, including establishing Buddha Dharma in a foreign land where it wasn't really firmly rooted yet, like Tibet. And in order to do that and expand like the beneficial outreaching kind of like ways that beings are more easily available to interact with the Buddha Dharma in more locations, right? In a more variety of ways. He did that, expanded, and he had to overcome a lot of different forces or kind of beings, energies, like that weren't Dharma friendly. That like love and wisdom, compassion were actually like they didn't feel comfortable with that. And Guru Rinpoche was able to actually demonstrate to these beings, this is like the nature of you, the nature of me, the nature of all beings, love, compassion, and wisdom, or bodhicitta. It's the nature of every heart mind, of the nature of every mind. And these beings were kind of like convinced, and they're like, so he like actually like brought all these beings to Dharma. And then at the end of his life, he didn't pass away. Like Buddha Shakyamuni demonstrated impermanence by manifesting kind of Mahaparinirvana, or like this passing. Guru Rinpoche, they say, depending on your view, some beings say he just disappeared, just in front of their very eyes. Some beings say he went into the sky in front of them, like levitated. Some beings say he rode a horse in the sky. It depended on the view. So to say what is Guru Rinpoche exactly, what he does, how he does, it's like always we're taking a view and then we're understanding according to that view. Just like if we try to understand like what is what is this? Like, are we going to answer as the chemical composition of this? Or are we going to answer in terms of the what atoms make this up, or what subatomic particles, or like, which part of the cosmic dust like this exactly is? Because we can locate this reasonably as like 21st century science-minded people. We can locate that and answer it like fully, validly, in any number of variety of ways. And they're all true. And they all depend on what we consider is like good evidence. Is it the chemical answer? Is that the true evidence? The literal answer? Is that the true evidence? Does it have to be logically consistent? Does it have to be a function of wisdom mind, of love and compassion? These are all ways that we can then, what is to define like what is an actual truth? What is Dharma? And it says to say it depends on the view. So to say, who is Guru Rinpoche? Who is Guru Padmasambhava? Guru Padmasambhava is the one looking through your very eyes right now. Guru Padmasambhava is the room you're in. Guru Padmasambhava is the Zoom, or this kind of like any way you interface with other beings. Guru Rinpoche is a happy, supportive, nutritious memory that reconnects you to your goodness. Guru Rinpoche is anything that awakens your own heart mind into a greater, more natural, relaxed, flourishing kind of isness, its own being fully manifesting. All of that is Guru Rinpoche. Let's say ultimately, Guru Rinpoche is the nature of reality happening. And then more relatively, in terms of pure relative truth, Guru Rinpoche had these 8 emanations. Guru Rinpoche has 108 emanations. Technically, Guru Rinpoche has about 108 biographies that are actually written in Tibet, discovered as terma by these great Tirthans. I'm throwing about a lot of terms. They're all true, according to the view. Guru Rinpoche is in each of the 6 realms. Guru Rinpoche is interfacing now from the future and from the past and from the present as every being you engage with. I mean, it's just so unfathomable to consider who is Guru Rinpoche, and we can locate it in a really narrow way and say, what's the literal historical fact of Guru Rinpoche? Show me the video. And that is one avenue of scientific investigation that's very legitimate. And look at what it's done. It's created this Zoom. That way of kind of navigating experience has done amazingly powerful, beneficial things in our experience, and amazingly nightmarish, horrific things that we've used that kind of technology to make things a lot more difficult for a lot of beings on this planet too. So to say, who's Guru Rinpoche? I mean, it's really... Guru Rinpoche is anything that helps you connect to your natural awareness right now. And Guru Rinpoche can be your teacher as helping you. Guru Rinpoche is your any being around. So this is very much more in the Vajrayana view of who is Guru Rinpoche. Yeah, it's really, they say that actual superstition is to believe that only logical mind is right. That's actually superstitious thinking. Logic is one very powerful, impactful, important way to understand reality. And there are these additional ways of integrating conceptualization, like refined, actual, thorough, valid cognition, sound reasoning. There's additional ways that all sentient mind functions. More body-based understanding, many more ways of attuning and aligning with like different resonant or different interactive cause, condition, effect, causal patterns that we're a part of. There's so many different intelligence that make up a single, seemingly simple moment of mind. And so logic is one pathway, and understanding Guru Rinpoche logically is very helpful. And at a certain point in a path of a Dharma practitioner, only being willing to understand logically is a very big obstacle. It shuts down all these other ways that we have intelligence, that our heart works, that our mind works. And we have to integrate these additional ways with the logical ones too. And that's why always Nyingma school is this union of study, meditation, and service, or like outreaching, compassionate activities. We need the logical mind. We need the wisdom of study and contemplation, and we need the wisdom of integrative, meditative, transformative experience. We need to train our minds, and we need to recognize how our minds are too, where we're not changing anything with any structure, like a logical pattern structure or another non-logical or post-logical structure either. We're just letting our intelligence naturally free flow and connect. Guru Rinpoche is like pretty much the most mysterious, amazing, and relevant topic for a Nyingma practitioner to consider. So yeah, those are some very simple reflections on something that's, if you go deep enough into trying to inquire about that question, who is Guru Rinpoche, you will find enlightenment. You will find your own enlightenment.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a fun one. It starts to, well, because I've started studying and practicing some of the Ngondro and the Dudjom lineage. And it's like a core, it kind of reminds me of a Zen koan. Like, who is this guy? guy at the kind of, through
in the
running
most
through all
literal
of the
response to
practices
who is
in a
Guru
way.
Rinpoche, if we're trying to be technical, factual, literal, historical, Guru Rinpoche emanated or was born 4 Gregorian years after the Buddha passed away. Okay, that's like 600 or so BCE. Guru Rinpoche established Buddhism fully in Tibet in the 8th century. That means the literal historical age of Guru Padmasambhava when he brought Buddhism into Tibet was almost 1,500 years old. That's the historical, literal account of Guru Rinpoche's life, not the metaphorical one. This is like, it requires us to have such a gigantically big view. And Vajrayana in general does. This is the great filter of Vajrayana. Am I willing to entertain the vastness and the profound complexity and simplicity of reality? Am I really willing to be this available with this much discernment, this much clear, pristine intelligence, to actually allow for my own small heart mind to really fully, comprehensively align with and attune with these vast interactive patterns, which is called interdependence. How much dependent arising am I willing to participate in? How much am I willing to let the Dharma actually inform my being and become where I become the Dharma? There's not an obstruction with how nature flows and how I'm willing to flow. I actually surrender and I go elegantly with nature. That's just to say I'm aligned with Dharma. I'm mingled with Dharma. And that's the big, profound Buddhist question in general and Vajrayana question in particular. How much of reality am I willing to entertain? Because Vajrayana is designed to stretch us outside of our box. We have a very specific duality frame window, and it can be the most powerful. We can have this much slice of reality that's exactly true. And then there's this much too. And there's this much. And we can look from the inside, and we can look from the outside, and we can look from the lens of a bird? Or what does a Gandharva experience that much reality from? Like, the omniscience of a Buddha is like what Buddha Dharma and specifically Vajrayana is trying to get us to do is become so flexible that we can elegantly accommodate all the perspectives available in experience naturally as a whole, as an integrated, coherent whole. This is called the omniscience, the relative omniscience of an awakened one, of a Buddha. They can simultaneously take every single perspective without omission or distortion. And they simultaneously also see that every one of those perspectives has the nature of dependent arising, of emptiness, of ultimate truth. And that the wisdom of an enlightened being, the wisdom and compassion, is these two omnisciences. And so Buddhism, and specifically Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, that's the view. Like, that's how it's inviting us to like really ask ourselves, am I willing to be this amazing? Am I willing to participate in this extraordinary amount of beauty, of truth and goodness, of naturalness? Am I willing to be natural? Am I willing to actually integrate with dependent arising? And Vajrayana just like right up front makes the question very visceral. And then it just shows us like how willing we are, where's the framing of our box, and like, what can we loosen up with intelligence, with a thorough kind of logic-based intelligence that actually also goes beyond logic. Why? For the benefit of beings. Because maybe the other being that's in the room, the other friend, the other daughter or child, the other stranger, maybe they don't see reality the way I see it. Well, what's it like to see, what's it like for their experience? Like, do I have enough compassion to like actually have genuine interest and curiosity? Like, how can I show up for you now better? Like, what's going on in your world? And if I really let that tender-hearted kind of bravery enter my mind stream, like the question of education becomes unlimited. Like, I want to learn every language. I want to learn any methodology, like anything that would help you and this person and that person in this situation for this time, whatever will be helpful to serve beings, whatever is an elegant way to manifest in reality, in experience, in this particular time and place, that becomes a skillful means in Vajrayana. And that's another distinguishing feature of Vajrayana in particular. In Nyingma school, definitely, this skillful means, like having a wide range of educational tools and methodologies that actually like sync up with or align with a living here now present moment reality in ways that are helpful, that actually nourish bodhicitta, the heart mind of enlightenment, to mutually turn on with whoever is involved in that moment of reality.
Great, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I wonder maybe we could move into talking a little bit more about just the landscape of practice methods, and
Cool.
maybe from the perspective of a beginner, of someone coming into the Vajrayana, what does that look like? And this whole phenomena of Ngondro, what is that? And then also, yeah, what's the I think this word Dzogchen gets thrown around a lot now in Dharma spaces in the West, and where's the practice going? what's the kind of
Wonderful.
arc too
Yeah, so
over
that's
time?
beautiful, Aaron. It's just another way to ask the question, what is Nyingma? So much more from the internal practice side. So Nyingma always established this set of kind of internested vehicles, or yanas, called view. Like anytime, it's like to give a little more clarity or granularity to this answer. Any moment of reality we experience always begins with a view. How is my mind making sense now? What's the worldview? And then based on that view, there's always a meditation or something we're doing to sustain that view. And then that's all internal. Then the next one is conduct or behavior. How am I manifesting that view or worldview with others in a world, in my shared experience with others? And then fourthly, What's the goal? What will be achieved when I maintain that worldview as an integrated lived experience with others? What's going to be the goal, the result? And so there's always these three. They're always an ecology or a completely coherent suite: view, meditation, conduct, and fruition. Every Buddhist approach has these four: view, meditation, conduct, fruition. So if we look at Nyingma school, we zoom in, always the core, like heart essence, is the Buddha's foundational teachings. Always. This is like the beating heart of all of the yanas or all of the views. And like this is typified, or like the essential essence, like many great masters have explained, is the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. There is this like pervasive dissatisfaction or dis-ease, this discomfort, this uncertainty. This suffering is there, and it has a cause of like this dualistic mind that does things that cause more suffering. And it has the possibility for it to end forever, cessation. And there is a path to cessation, the Fourth Noble Truth. This is like the bedrock teaching. So if I'm in a duality frame of mind that creates suffering, it's called a samsaric state of mind, there is a path to end that samsaric state of mind, to reveal a non-samsaric way of being. So Nyingma school always, as a practice method, has at the very core this foundational Buddhist approach. And sometimes it's called renunciation, renouncing the causes of suffering. Sometimes that's called in a more positive light, joy and appreciation, gratitude. Emphasizing the causes of happiness. Like, what causes me to be happy? And to taste the result of happiness. Like all the variety of happiness and long-lasting happiness. That's actually called happiness beyond happiness, this nirvana, nirodha, cessation. That's always at the core of anything in the Nyingma view and anything in Vajrayana view. So here we have the first is the foundational Buddhism. And in addition, we have like Sutra Mahayana, the sutra teachings, and specifically in the Mahayana, the greater vehicle, the more inclusive vehicle of Buddhist teachings. And then thirdly, we have Tantra Mahayana, this Tantra teachings of this big, profound, vast view. And then fourthly, we have this Dzogchen view, this great perfection or great completion. So it's important to see this, like the Dzogchen always includes Vajrayana, always includes Sutra Mahayana, always includes the heart essence of the foundation of Buddhism, Theravada. They're always a seamless, integrated whole. That is the great completion in the Dzogchen approach, from how I've learned it, and I'm just learning, I'm a student. But this is according to Jamgon Minpan Rinpoche, and according to the great omniscient Longchenpa and the Buddha and Guru Rinpoche too. That's from the Venerable Khenpo Rinpoches all say this. So practice-wise, so like what does that mean practically? Always is the ground of renunciation or joy and appreciation. Undoing or removing, like reducing and eliminating the causes of suffering. There's many methods on how to do that. Many foundational, you can go from the Satipatthana Sutta, follow the Eightfold Noble Path. You can cycle through the 12 links of interdependent origination. There's so many ways the Buddha taught in these foundational levels of sutra teaching. Then in addition, he opened that teaching more directly, more clearly, more comprehensively, like displaying the nature of reality when it's less filtered through duality grasping. And he pointed to say, look at the nature of that mind that feels the suffering. Really try to pinpoint that awareness, pinpoint the suffering. Really try to demonstrate where is the cause of suffering. And he said in that kind of cycle, or like that, they call it the turning, that second turning, the Buddha said, if you look closely enough at any apparent thing, it dissolves under analysis. Samsara dissolves, nirvana dissolves. And what does that mean? It's saying it's actually the problem, the experience of there being a problem, like there is suffering. It's mainly just a function of my view, how I'm holding, how I'm interpreting the experience that I'm viewing, that I'm a part of. And if we look closely enough at the viewer and at how we're holding things, it actually loosens up. So they say analysis is to loosen. So with really clear, thorough analysis, the problems loosen. And most of the troubles we experience are just like false problems. They're much more a function of grasping duality, tense mind. So the second turning teachings of the Mahayana, the greater vehicle, greater means it's it includes the essential foundational teaching and goes beyond them to show even more reality according to how the Buddha experienced it. These Mahayana teachings, that's why the great quintessential heart sutra, like this very pithy way that all the 100,000 teachings of the Prajnaparamita, this like quintessential Mahayana teachings, have all distilled, where the Buddha, it's so amazing. The Buddha systematically refuted every different teaching he gave in the first turning. No samsara, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no mind, no body, no... The Buddha just went through the 12 links and said, none of that's true. Four Noble Truths, none of that's true ultimately. There is no freedom. Why? Because their mind was never in prison. The mind just thought it was in prison, and it cycled in this very destructive, kind of addictive pattern of karmic behavior, karmic mind, klesha mind, afflicted emotional mind. And because it did that pattern so much, it seemed like this is the only way to do it. And these Mahayana teachings say that ease up. If we relax and loosen up, we actually let our mind not cycle in such a tight, dense, dualistic, distorted way. All of a sudden, so many of these problems just dissolve on their own. We take a greater view. And then thirdly, the third turning. In addition, he taught Vajrayana, or Tibetan Buddhism. This, in addition to seeing that the nature of each of these apparent things or entities, experiences, anything we could discretely locate and pinpoint, the nature is actually boundless, openness, interdependent arising, or emptiness, empty of being stuck, empty of being fixated and frozen, not truly existent, not singular, permanent, and dependent, but actually an internested kind of matrices of cause, condition, and effect, just interdependence. Everything is interdependence. Everything is interdependent. There is no such thing as an isolated thing. So these are these great emptiness teachings of Sutra Mahayana. In addition, the Buddha said that because we've like cycled in these addictive, destructive, self-other destructive patterns for so long, since beginningless time, and we believe that they're true, we fundamentally in our body-mind structure, like we're oriented towards this false truth that samsara is real. I need to escape. Because we've done that so long, Buddha provided this entire range, this suite, this buffet of all these skillful ways that different beings, different heart minds can like directly experience their nature when it's not in this dualistic kind of like samsaric mind. How is your mind before it locks up? How is your heart before it closes? And so all the Vajrayana, skillful means methods of Vajrayana, are these different supportive means, these skillful means, to actually directly taste freedom, to taste enlightenment, to taste how our nature is before it breaks itself into this binary structure of suffering, absence of suffering, freedom, prison. How is your mind before that? And so there's all these Vajrayana methods to actually these skillful means methods, and they depend on different beings. What's helpful for you? What's helpful for me? And those are all said to be condensed like elegantly in Ngondro, the foundational practices of Tibetan Buddhism. They're said to seamlessly integrate the foundational teachings of Buddha, the like Mahayana, like the bodhicitta or the heart essence teachings of like how your heart mind is when it's so vast and profound. It's called bodhicitta, the heart mind of enlightenment. In addition, it integrates the skillful means of Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism. And in addition, it integrates these Dzogchen naturalness teachings of, there's just saying, if you actually look closely enough at your heart and your mind, and you allow them to do what they do when they're settled, when they're natural, then it actually, all these kind of communicative abilities, like they naturally express themselves. You don't have to like tell your mind how to be. It already is just naturally as it is. So these are all the so-called highest or like most inclusive, most simple, like elegant, effortless teachings of just say, be natural. But then the practical question for me as a practitioner, for you as a practitioner is, can I just be natural? And then the question is, if I can be natural for a moment, can I be natural for a minute, 5 minutes, an hour, a day, when I'm sleeping, when someone says something mean? And so then these become like the practical reality of like what is supportive for my mind and my heart on the path. So like what view like am I willing to entertain? And so thus, like, what meditation and what conduct and fruition like aligns with that view. And so there's so many ways to achieve liberation, freedom from suffering, and there's so many different ways to skillfully engage with beings. And so this Ngondro is a way to, like, very kind of in a distilled way, it hits all the kind of like main highlight essential points of like the living, beating heart of like the complete or comprehensive teachings of the Buddha, which is also just like a very simple way to designate something that's uncountable, uncategorizable. They say it's the 84,000 teachings, or each teaching was given to like be a counteractive, like healing balm for the 84,000 ways that we can like go astray, that we can miss the point. But they actually say the teachings are limitless. There's a teaching for every single state of mind, every single way that our heart shuts down. There's a teaching for that. There's a path. And so it's inexhaustible. And so Nyingma school is technically inexhaustible. The nature is inexhaustible. So is Sarma, the new school. The profound methods are inexhaustible, and so is Theravada. It's inexhaustible. The wisdom and compassion and all the levels of the Buddha's teaching are just amazingly brilliant and amazing. That's why the deeper I think people go into Buddhism, the deeper you cherish and savor all the different teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha's Theravada teachings are just extraordinary. Like, to actually just sit and abide, like to like learn what it's like just to be with your mind and your heart, like as it is, just happening however it is. And then in addition to intentionally bring up and generate joy, this aspiration that all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then to, in addition, intentionally manifest your enlightened nature as Guru Rinpoche, as the Buddha, as Tara, as these deities or enlightened beings. And to manifest to literally have the boldness, braveness, curiosity to like entertain the possibility this is actually a sacred world we're already in. This is actually already a pure land. This is like very straight up Vajrayana view. In Dzogchen, just every single way we could experience reality, its very nature is pure and perfect. There's nothing that has to be changed. It's completely perfect already. Every single aspect of it. And to have a full range of inexhaustible practices that actually can make that a lived experience as the situation, as cause, condition, and in effect change. Like, that's the great completion, the great Mahasandhi. But to live that as something you actually get stable at, that in any variety of circumstance, no matter what challenge happens, you can maintain natural thread of continuity of your enlightened awareness happening in touch with other beings. And this is like what's enlightenment. This is awakening. So this is called like becoming a Buddha.
Great. I'm wondering maybe we could share a little bit more about so if people are getting involved with Vajrayana practice, maybe they'll start by doing the Ngondro, and then my understanding is then you receive other practices later on, and kind of progress through a curriculum in a way. And I know there's also ordination, and ordination is a track, but maybe you could speak a little bit about the role of ordination and what it means. And I think the Vajrayana is known for having more. Many of the senior, like the enlightened kind of masters, have been lay people, and there's this sort of role of the lay practitioner. But also there's the monastic side, and what does that mean? And what specifically, I'm curious, what precepts do the monks follow, and is it kind of traditional, or is it been changed over time? And what does the monastic life look like in the Nyingma school?
To close that point, and as you began that question, Ngondro is a lifelong practice, which is to say, if we're a Buddhist practitioner, we have to always attune with and honor foundational teachings of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva or the Mahayana teachings of the Buddha, the Tibetan Buddhist indestructible vehicle teachings of the Buddha, and the Great Completion teachings. Ngondro integrates them all in a simple way that can be done in an Like you sit down on your cushion, you do a complete practice, and it hits all those main essential points as an integrated whole. So we're basically turning on and aligning with all the different aspects of all the teachings the Buddha gave. That's why Ngondro is so powerful. This is a practice that all these great Nyingma masters kept as a daily practice. So many teachers say that. That's always something they continued, even as they went specifically zoomed in into particular other practices, like that just highlighted certain features that Ngondro already includes. They say the total path of Buddhism includes accumulating merit, purifying negativities, and receiving blessings. In the Nyingma view, this is the complete path. Accumulate merit, purify negativities, and receive blessings. This is what Ngondro does, and this is what any Tibetan Buddhist or Vajrayana practice is going to do. It's going to accumulate merit. What does that mean? The natural goodness qualities we have, turn them on and let them be fully, optimally as they are, which is limitless. Limitless love and limitless compassion. And then purify negativities, anything that blocks that from happening, from our natural love, compassion, and wisdom from turning on, we remove that obstructive force, that habit, that negative habit. And then how do we do that most directly? Receive the blessings. Receive the blessings of the enlightened beings, which just means have your own natural enlightened intelligence line up with the natural intelligence and wisdom of the other beings. And be a part of their field of how they are, how natural enlightened awareness is. That's called receiving the blessings. Simply put, be natural. So Ngondro includes this always, and so does any Vajrayana practice, whether it's a peaceful practice that's maybe soothing, nourishing, and uplifting, or a wrathful practice where it's very just resolutely, surgically removing a destructive habit. There's no negotiation. This destructive, raging anger is a poison that's eliminating all the goodness qualities. I'm going to intentionally target it and remove it, or open it, release it. So that's called wrathful practice, and the full range in between. There's many different ways that we can do in Vajrayana to do this. They're all based on the view that our body and our speech and our mind are fundamentally already enlightened. It's called pure body, pure speech, and pure mind. Then Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism calls that deity is pure body. Pure speech is called mantra. Pure mind is called dharmakaya. The deity, mantra, and dharmakaya, that's just pure body, pure speech, pure mind, which is to say how your body, speech, and mind are when they're enlightened. How they are when they're not enlightened is called sentient, or dualistic, or impure body, impure speech, impure mind. This is the distinguishing feature of whether we're taking a sutra or tantra approach. Sutra approach believes more clearly in impure body, impure speech, and impure mind, and gradually it tries to recognize pure body, pure speech, pure mind. Tantra approach begins right with pure body, pure speech, pure mind, and from deity, mantra, and dharmakaya allows that goodness, the wisdom, compassion, and love to manifest naturally. These are the two different approaches of sutra and tantra. And Ngondro practices both of them. Whether we take the sutra view or the tantra view, they both have to be seamlessly integrated into a whole. And so this is what's helpful for each being. It depends on the being. It depends on their mood, on the day, on what they've experienced, their trauma, their language, their talents, their hang-ups. The path is always viewer-specific. So then the additional question of whether a monastic or a non-monastic path is helpful for someone, whether to take a certain set of vows that are the 5 precepts as a lay person or non-monastic person, or the entry level or more novice monk, novice nun ordination vows. They're all oriented towards the same goal. Reveal the goodness nature of oneself and others. Remove what's blocking the goodness nature of self and others, and do that until all goodness nature is fully revealed. In some beings, some people, it's helpful to just not be as caught up in typical worldly activities, owning a house, having a family that you have to care for, having a certain kind of career path job. there's nothing inherently bad or wrong with any of that. But for some minds, that's actually more problematic for them to stay on track. For other minds, that's actually what makes them brighten. It makes their compassion turn on, to like raise kids, to care for a home, to like be with a partner, to like be in the world engaging. Like for some people, that is the more actionable, like activating, like coherent, resonant path. Like that's for their mind and their approach, their body, their mind. That's actually more helpful. So both ways have produced countless enlightened beings, the monastic path and the non-monastic path. Buddha Shakyamuni was a fully ordained monk. Guru Padmasambhava was a non-monastic lay practitioner. They're like the quintessential examples of what full unsurpassed enlightenment is like. Both of these paths go all the way to full enlightenment. There's no question about that in Tibetan Buddhism. But then the question becomes for myself, like which way is helpful for me? But they're all based on the 5 precepts. And they all come down to a question of mind. Why make mindfulness movement is actually very relevant, even though it's very limited and it's like a way it's being rolled out now in like non-Buddhist circles. But you actually have to know what your mind is doing as it's doing it. You need mindfulness, like what is my awareness doing now, to know what view am I in, to know how do I work with this view skillfully for the benefit of self and others. Without the mindfulness, we're just in confusion, in ignorance. So we have to know in a moment, is this serving my mind to be more loving, compassionate, and wise? And in a life, like we're actually making practical decisions of where do I want to live for a while? How am I gonna make my money? Do I want to make money? Like what am I gonna go deep into in my education? Those are practical decisions we're all making, whether we like consciously look at them or not. But if we consciously like tune into our mind and our abilities and where we're wanting to go and kind of like what supportive kind of people and things we have at our disposal, resources, then we can consciously like engage a path, like an enlightened path, that's going to be a little more likely to kind of be smooth or successful, supported according to what's actually happening in my heart and my mind. They all believe in like the first fundamental 5 precepts. Don't consciously kill beings. Don't consciously steal things. Don't intentionally or consciously have sexual misconduct or use intoxicants that bring more confused states of mind. Or like don't consciously deceive people, deceive self or other. These 5 precepts are shared amongst monks, nuns, lay women, and lay men. This 4-fold Sangha, they all have these 5 foundational vows. And in addition, the monastic path has additional vows of like not engaging with certain things that like a typical so-called worldly or like someone in the world doing kind of these kind of things would have. Like don't intentionally own gold or kind of silver. Don't sleep on a high luxurious bed. There's like whole sets. There's ends up being hundreds of different vows that a monk or a nun could take if they chose to, like as a supportive way to have their own mindfulness be on more regularly, their own heart be open more regularly. And to some degree, there is flexibility with which vows. Like, first off, like what vows are helpful for my mind, that's a personal decision. Monastic or non-monastic. And then if we zoom into monastic, which vows are going to help me like maintain my bodhicitta, my love, compassion, and wisdom, my path towards the cessation of suffering, the benefit of all beings, then it depends on the mind. And like a lot of the monastic rules were just made, I mean, I think honestly, they say almost all of them were made in response to a situation. The Buddha didn't just lay out like, here are my do's and don'ts. A situation arose, and then as a result of the situation, which caused kind of more confusion, the Buddha said, okay, from here on out, like, don't do this anymore if you're a monk or a nun. And many of those, depending on where we are in the world and kind of what's our, specific embodiment, a lot of those vows for monks and nuns are actually keeping us protected from other beings. It's like keeping us safe, keeping a sangha safe, keeping our minds safe. It's just like kind of the practical reality of our world too. There's a lot of patriarchy, there's a lot of chauvinism, there's a lot of classism, there's a lot of elitisms of various kinds. Duality mind is filled with isms. There's like infinite isms, infinite ways we can shut down and become fundamentalist, even as Buddhists. And so many of the different rules, these Vinaya vows for monks and nuns, were to protect beings trying to maintain a path of peace from being exposed to or harmed by other beings or other situations that wouldn't be conducive for their path of peace. They're actually kind of protective mechanisms or kind of guardrails. And so there is flexibility with that. So depending on our time and circumstance, but that's that kind of a question of because it comes to this root question in Buddhism of what's essence and what's expression, what's definitive truth and what's provisional or interpretable. This is a very foundational question in Buddhism that's been debated for centuries amongst Buddhists. And that has to be discussed with a lot of clarity and collaboration amongst experts of the field, just like the great astrophysicists would try to, discuss with clarity and collaboration, is there a seamless integration of the general and relative theories that Einstein pointed to? I mean, that's it's a conversation amongst experts to not be taken lightly, because it needs to be really done with a lot of fine-tuned care. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but there's both paths are fully complete, monastic and non-monastic. In general, I recommend if you're thinking a monastic path for yourself might be something you'd want to pursue, before adopting the vows, before taking precepts from a preceptor who would give you the vows, try them out in your life. There's a lot of books on what they are and how to engage them and questions that come up during that if you keep applying them. You can learn about this, use study. The Buddha always said, turn your wisdom on. Study, reflect on it, try it out in your lived experience before you commit as a lifestyle choice for your whole life. Try it out. What would it be like to not, to really hold these 5 fundamental precepts? Don't kill, steal, lie, sexual activity that's very harmful for self or others, or don't use intoxicants. Try it out before you take the formal vow. See if it actually helps your heart and mind to open and shine on more. And then it's that you find that that's really buoyant for your path, more devotion, more connection, more enthusiasm to practice the Dharma, more energy to study and to actually have cushion time. And that might really be something you want to pursue more seriously, is with more commitment or more dedicated kind of enthusiastic energy. But usually with these things, slow and steady is the long-term way. Just like anything that actually has deep roots that's more sustainable and long-lasting, it almost always grows slow and steady. There can be this bursts of creative insight and realignment, transformative impact, but they're always situated within very deep-rooted structures, which goes directly to lineage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a really complex and not a simple question to answer. None of these are simple questions, but well, we're coming towards the end, and I think I'd love to hear, a sort of general advice that you might have for younger practitioners, or also people who are, early in, maybe they're interested in Vajrayana Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, curious about it, don't really know how to get involved, and also just young people in general who are thinking about, building a life of practice, or, building a meaningful life, building a virtuous life in this crazy time.
Every moment matters. Every single thing we do has significant impact. You can ground that in aspiration. Really longing for Dharma, longing to actually have peace manifest through you, longing to be good, longing for enlightenment, longing for others to be free of suffering. This is called aspiration. That is a profound Dharma practice. There's so many teachings on aspirational bodhicitta, just the power of aspiration, of view. Just because our culture is so kind of more strongly oriented towards product and consuming and tangibility and literal factualness, these are all really important features of reality. Empiricism in general is very important. view or the worldview always comes first. How is my view now? To like really put a lot of extra attention on what view am I living through now, and what view do I want to be living through now? And that's going to determine your path. What way do I want to be? What view, not just like I'm this removed, distant viewer, but like what is the lived, contextual world shaping that I want to participate in my body, in my mind, in my emotional landscape, with my community, with my relationships? How do I want to be in this world? That is like such a tender, relevant, like heart question of someone who wants to take Dharma seriously. And that has nothing to do with Buddhism. That is just a sentient, that is someone who has awareness and recognizes the power, the tremendous power of that awareness to determine every other thing that happens with that body and that mind. Really don't underestimate the power of your mind, for good and for negativity. To free yourself and to lock yourself in. So like really come back to the power of the mind and like highlight the importance of turning on a specific view, a way you want to be in the world. That is bedrock foundational rooting in Buddhism. Really recognize the view you're in and you want to be in, and it aligns with meditation, conduct, and fruition every time, every moment. If you're a young person, I mean, there's so much advice. I mean, for young people and old people, like I find so much of Buddha's teachings are like, we basically have this treasure trove of advice from these enlightened wisdom masters who are both elders in wisdom and elders of experience, just like longer lives. Like to actually have an open-mindedness, this what-if mentality. What if this advice the Buddha gave is true? What if the six realms are real? What if I have an enlightened nature now? What if I could be enlightened in a single lifetime? What if this reality that we're experiencing is already sacred? What if samsara is just an actual way that my mind fixates on things? To have this open dimensionality of mind and heart, this is profound in Buddhism. That will have a big impact on what path you choose, like what actually works for you. How open are you willing to be? And open and precise. How loose and clear. How calm and clear. These are always these two, the relative and the absolute. How spacious, so you can really define things with a lot of clarity. Always has these two. But the general thing is like how open-minded you can be without having your brain fall out of your head. Like, you need to be like wisdom and compassion. If there's too much compassion and there's not wisdom, heartbreak of the injustices of the world will crush you. I know a lot of people being crushed by this now. They're so sensitive to like the injustice, and the wisdom, the absolute true side is not really there yet, so there's no space to hold it in a much larger, wider way, and they break. On the opposite side, if you only emphasize wisdom only, as if it's all emptiness, and so like relative relationship doesn't really matter that much, these are just kind of insignificant details, that's also an extreme view. The Buddha never taught that. Emptiness is the coherence of relational patterning. It's the flexibility of patterning of relationship, dependent arising, to do it in an elegant, loving, embodied, nutritious way. To have this union of wisdom and compassion, of emptiness and compassion. That is the like full teaching of the Buddha. So to like have a very spacious mind that's very tender-hearted. And when we get too tender-hearted, get more spacious. When we get too spacey, get more like clear and like tender-hearted with actual detail. Toggling between these two will help us stay on a path and not get in like an extreme detour, not become a fundamentalist Buddhism, like a fundamentalist Buddhist, which we want to avoid at all costs. We like don't want to put a stain on this family name. We want wisdom and compassion to fully integrate with our beings, which also is a third point. Like put yourself around people who know more about this stuff than you, where you get in their presence and it's like, wow, man, my love and compassion just like naturally wants to increase now. I mean, it could be a man or woman, old, young, rich, poor. They have different skills. There's so many varieties of ways that beings can inspire each other. Find a community, find a Sangha. It can be small people, like a small little group. It can be big name people. But like find people where you can be in touch with them and they can actually give you some good constructive feedback, and you can actually respond to the feedback. So there's enough of a give and take in the relationship where you're a part of a community. You're not just zooming in every now and then, or you're not just showing up for a weekend event. That's all important to like get a taste or a feel for like where you want to go deeper. But at a certain point, like you have to choose to go deeper a little bit more. It doesn't mean forever, but you actually have to locate yourself and root yourself a little bit around other people that can give co-creative feedback, and you can give them feedback. Sangha mutually inspires one another. That's what we do as a Sangha. But we do it like honoring elder wisdom. There's people much further along on this path than me, much further. I mean, I'm like so insignificant and distorted being. So I rely on that to like make my path actually more clear, more smooth, more like actual successful in terms of my naturalness shining on more regularly. So put yourself in a community of people a little bit. You can do it via Zoom, digitally, virtually. You can do it in the flesh, embodied in this more immersive way, which is going to ask more of your being to turn on. That's very vitally important. But if the path is a true path in terms of Buddha Dharma, it's going to start pushing your buttons. It's going to say, expand the box a little bit, Dragpa. Expand your box. Open your heart and mind a little further with clarity and discernment and intelligence, not recklessly, but with slow and steady, greater inclusivity that includes the coherent patterns of cause, condition, and effect. But it's going to rub us a little bit. That's why there's so-called crazy wisdom. What's crazy wisdom? Crazy wisdom is when a master sees exactly with clarity and attunement and compassion, where am I getting stuck? And what's available in me to loosen up a little bit so all of a sudden I can have a deeper insight. All of a sudden I can have a greater compassionate connection to the lineage teachings, to the beings around me. That's called skillful means or wisdom. Crazy wisdom because it asks us to go out of our box a little bit. Wisdom means it actually turns on our bodhicitta, love, compassion, and wisdom more. If it doesn't do that, it's just crazy. It's not skillful. The person isn't aligning with what's actually helpful for us. They're pushing us way out of our box in a way that we can't actually land. That's not helpful. That's hurtful. So crazy wisdom is always like just with very elegant, refined attunement, like just what'll help the specific body mind to open up more fully so its nature like even more gorgeously expresses itself. So the grasping tension releases a little bit or a lot, depending on what we're available for. But life is short. It's really short. This gray hair came fast. I've been here 20 years. It's like a speck of time. 20 years is like nothing. 20 years has shown me have such baby intelligence in terms of the profound and vast teachings of the Buddha. It's so amazingly profound. And these great masters, these living lineage masters, they're alive. There's many actual living lineage masters, Theravada ones, Sutra Mahayana ones, Tantra Mahayana ones, Dzogchen ones, of both Nyingma and Sarma, old and new schools. There's so many amazingly realized beings in this world. Like, find some that you connect with and do it with intelligence. Like, check them thoroughly. Turn on your prajna and like be around them. Is this helpful? Are they skillful? Do they do what they say in public and private? Did they walk the talk? Are they compassionate all the time? Are they genuinely kind? Have they studied the Dharma? These are all questions the Buddha asked us to investigate for ourselves. And you can do that, but no one will do it for you. Like in the end, it says be your own teacher. And on the path, rely on other people who know more, who also just see in different ways that help us fill out our perspective a little more fully, more richly, like we include a little more reality. We have to be humble enough and courageous enough to know I don't have all the answers. I'm kind of winging this like most people. Like, how can I help you? How can you help me? How can we mutually benefit each other in the long run for all beings, as long as it takes? And if you're really willing to entertain that much reality, if you have more of a bodhisattva aligned path, then this becomes like, this challenging time becomes just the richest, ripest opportunity for you to show up now. Everything is going to ask you to help. Everything. And then your own intelligence is going to say, well, what am I available for? What do I need to train in more? What do I need to relax a little more? What do I need to wait, I'm going to pause on this because I need to go deeper here. I need to refresh. I need to rejuvenate. I can't just go. All these things, reality, the challenge of all these perspectives slamming together in a lot of fragmented ways right now. We're kind of mixing and matching, people trying things out. The Buddha said this vast view of how all these infinite perspective and experiences of material and of mind are interacting all the time in these perfect causal patterns. But on a path, we're only doing a little bit at a time because that's all our mind's available for. But all of a sudden, we have these news cycles and everything that's asking us to orient all this stuff all at once, when most of us are only available for a little bit. Even if that's a really significant little bit, we need to give ourselves the time and space to mature, to open, to relax. We need to be really discerning on what we take in and what we don't take in. Some toxic stuff we just don't need inside. It's not helpful for the path. That's up to one's own discernment. What is skillful for me and what's not? We don't, our culture is going to ask us to all become addicts of everything. Keep in a trance, believing in samsara. This is the only way, It's all these mainstream cultural trends are trying to get us to be like that. We really have to break that spell. And this is the perfect time for bodhisattvas. But bodhisattvas who are intelligent and skillful. We need to be rooted. We need to be replenished. We need, another beautiful thing for younger people. It took me 20 years to see this. Just because we're obsessed with big scale, large, obvious things like a country or a transnational corporation, no causal pattern big and that complex. It always starts with very tiny integrated details. And that is a moment of mind. That is genuinely asking someone how they are and listening. That is a moment of a tremendous impact and causal density. And if we can have that moment of mind, that moment of heart, sync up with this greater field of enlightened intention of these enlightened beings, of these worlds we're a part of. If we can have this really high quality, super dense nutrition moment of heart-mind, elegantly aligned with these greater fields of cause, condition, and effect, then we can ride those ocean waves of enlightened energy and activity. This is called receiving the blessing. This is the power of Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism, that we can elegantly integrate and seamlessly align with these much vaster fields of intelligence than what we're currently capable of in terms of our sentience. That's a very quick way to mingle with the enlightened wisdom, awareness, and activities of these enlightened beings. And then they help us get that big and that pervasive and that nuanced, slowly but surely. But we don't have to build all the thing all at once. No one's ever done it. That is a total myth. That's superstitious thinking. The only way to do this large-scale, complex things that are urgently asking for us to show up is to begin with really high-quality, present moment action and being. It's the only way it's ever been done.
Well, I want to, this is a really wonderful answer. A lot to chew on there. But I think I'll, want to thank you for your time and start to wrap up. And I think there's a lot of information about how people can be involved with Padmasambhava, and I'll just add it in the comments or the kind of description for this, because it'll be available on the website, and people can explore there if they're interested in being involved with the either residency or the various retreats and programs. So thank you for a really, really wonderful conversation. There's a lot.
Yeah, it's one of my styles too, Aaron,
to encounter.
It's kind of information age. It's almost like information overload age. And I like to like put out the fullness of an
Mm.
approach where people can kind of zoom in and resonate with what kind of like lightens or highlights for them. But I'm really not a fan of trying to dumb stuff
Mm.
down. It's like the richness of mind of people's intelligence, it's rich. And like
Mm.
I liked being talked to as an adult that like can go deep. But like present something fully and richly, and like I when I don't have the expectation that I'm going to get it all right off the bat just by like casually listening to a podcast as I do my dishes, like no, not going to happen. But like, was there like a little highlight point? Was there like some insight that's like, maybe I'll
Yeah.
chew on that a little more. Maybe
Mm.
that I'll soften around that a little more. That's like how we're living life anyway. When you really look back in your life, like, what are the highlights I remember? It's almost always the felt tone experience. It made me feel connected. It made me feel loved. Like, it made me feel a part of this larger thing. And it asked me to show up more fully. Like those, like it's, we might forget that what exactly the food was and what color t-shirt I was wearing or which of the path's lives I was what body. Like, but we really remember like the high quality, like tone, the lived felt presencing. And we can be that for each other. We can really show up with a lot of presence and like actual genuine interest and concern and just enthusiastic mutual boosting. That's like literally living Sangha. Like anytime you do that, you're becoming like a devoted, noble Sangha member. Like I really, hands bowed to every moment of mind and heart where like you show up in that way. That is a tremendously impactful evolutionary move you've just made that in the future, when we look back with much more wisdom and intelligence than we have now, we'll recognize these moments and be like, that was like a significant advancement forward for my heart and mind opening. These tiny little high dense things are going to become, they're just
Mm.
amazingly powerful. For really, don't underestimate your power, even if it's just silently sitting, even if it's just listening. These are like incredibly powerful offerings we're making to the
Mm.
world. And we're really making it a better place. We're like actually co-participating in sacred world right in those moments. So thanks, Aaron. Thanks for Dharma Gates. It's a kind of a inspiring vision that you all have to like have people get
Mm.
introduced to the Buddha Dharma and its variety of ways and ecologies of different sanghas, and like, and people can engage it kind of like in ways that are kind of lighting up for themselves. Like I really appreciate that. It's a noble thing to like bridge building and like kind of just highlighting different pathways, doorways, Dharma gates into like how one can like have this be a more integrative, like immersive experience in one's lived experience. So really big shout out to everyone helping open those doors. And big shout out to all the lineage masters that were
Mhm.
like walking
Thank
in their
you.
footsteps that have widely opened these doors like for century and millennia and eons actually.
Mm.
Big homage to
Yeah.
them. May we always like follow and be receptive to the noble guidance that they offer.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Well, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you
Thanks, man.
again. And I'll go ahead and stop it there.